Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the beach. Welcome to my channel. So this week, I want to talk to you about tattooing for the MC. Working for an MC-owned tattoo studio. Now, why do I want to talk about that? Was it an absolute peachy time? Was it great? Was it full of beautiful art, encouragement, you know, making great tattoos, happy times, you know, great bosses who are supportive and all that kind of good stuff that it should be? It wasn't. It wasn't at all. You know, it wasn't even close to being that. It was probably the polar opposite of it all. In those years, there was nothing but fear and intimidation and constant harassment about not making money. And, you know, we're going to go into it. So buckle up and let's talk about those years, the darkest years, being a slave to the MC. Now, when I say MC-owned tattoo studios, what I am referring to is MC members generally owned tattoo studios. They also owned a lot of different businesses, normally like tow truck businesses, mechanic shops, anything where there was a lot of cash coming in and they could, you know, do what they needed to do for their other business transactions. Tattooing was great because it was pretty much all cash back then. It was busy. There was a lot of money coming in, so it was easy for them to hide it, and it was lucrative. It also meant that they could get tattooed, they could bring their brothers down and they get tattooed. As I said, I worked for an MC-owned studio for years. It was owned by several MC members. The guy that I actually worked for, he was kind of the front man. He ran the studio. His brothers were silent partners, mostly financial, and they're there to back him up if he needed. And why did he need backup? Because when you intimidate people and when you make them afraid, you need that backup. And he used the club to do that all the time. Now, when I first started working for him, I didn't really see a lot of it. You know, I was kind of the new kid on the block. I'd just been working in America, you know, so I was kind of like the superstar. One of the tattoo magazines had just done an 8-page feature article on me. So I was like, hey, this is the guy to get tattooed. So yeah, he was okay with me. But then, you know, I started in the party scene. And I started hanging out at the club and doing all this stuff. So he really started embedding himself in my personal life as well. And when this guy had someone that he wanted to hold on to, he would do everything to make sure you didn't leave. And generally, a lot of it was fear and intimidation. And I got told from him and many of the other guys about him bashing artists, breaking their hands, taking their equipment, doing all this crazy stuff. You know, guys who wanted to leave just because they didn't want to work for him anymore, they would get the bash. And if you made a mistake, if you fucked up in any way, you generally just get absolutely torn apart, you get ripped apart, and if it was bad enough, he would bash you and throw you out. It's crazy. It was so much psychological head games going on. Most of us didn't know who we were or what we were doing. All we knew is we had to come to work. We had to be there and we had to work, and we had to work the way he told us to, which was, for me, it was really, really hard. It wasn't initially, you know, he built this up. He started wearing me down, and, you know, he would come in and it's like, you know, oh, you didn't do this tattoo. Why didn't you do this tattoo? I'm like, well, you know, it's not something I would do. It's not something I'm capable of. I don't give a fuck. Take the money, fuck them off. It was constantly things like that. I'm like, man, that's, you know, I try to always have integrity when it comes to my art and tattooing. I don't want to do something on someone that I thought wasn't going to be my best. But as far as he was concerned, a lot of the club were concerned. It's all about the money, make the fucking money. I kept working for him, you know. I was making pretty good money, you know, and I was giving him a lot of my money. And then after a while, he opened a bigger studio and he asked me to manage it. And I went, oh, great. Because I'd started gaining position with the club as well. You know, I'd started becoming a hang-around and, you know, I kind of wanted to be a part of that life. And I thought, well, this is great. This is, you know, helping me with my position in business and the club and everything. And it was good. You know, the studio was busy. You know, we're making a lot of money. He started really harassing me a lot about stuff. You know, it was constant and it was getting worse all the time. He would call and just start ripping into you for stuff that never actually happened. You know, there's someone else at one of the other studios had told him because they're trying to win favor with him. so he doesn't yell at them. And this is how bad it got psychologically in these studios. Because he owned about four or five studios, and the artists used to move around between studios. And they would all try to buy his favor because they just didn't want to be intimidated or yelled at by the guy. So a lot of the time I copped it because I was the standout artist in all the studios. I was the one making all the money. I was booked out, you know, for sometimes up to 6 months at a time. And in all that time, I never got encouragement from him. I never got words of support or, you know, like, hey, you're doing great. Like, that's a beautiful tattoo, you know, none of that. There's always, how much money have you made? And he would do stupid shit all the time. Like, he would get people to call and try and make a booking, you know, and he'd come in and look at the books and go, look, there's only one tattoo in there, and you turn that away. I'm like, yeah, that one tattoo's the whole day though. He's, oh, no, bullshit. And you would have to spend almost a whole day trying to explain to him, you know, and he just wouldn't want to hear it. And he would call you back. He'd hang up on you after yelling at you, call you back, yell at you some more, hang up. And I got to the point where we knew it was him that was calling because, you know, the ringtone sounded really angry. And we're like, oh, that's him calling. Sure enough, it was. And he wouldn't go, hey, what's up? Just instantly you pick it up and he'd be yelling at you. So there was always that going on, and it was just insane. Luckily, he wasn't that smart, so I was able to kind of work my way around him. You know, I figured him out. But, you know, and I can put up with a lot of the yelling and berating and stuff like that, you know. And he would just constantly insult you, he would call you all sorts of horrible names. He would just talk bad on everyone, and he would do it to the other artists. He would talk to one artist about the other artists who worked at the same studio, absolutely just berating them and calling them all sorts of names and everything. It was such a toxic environment. But it was so toxic and so dark that no one could leave, because every time anyone mentioned going elsewhere, moving to another city or state, they'd be like, nah, you ain't leaving. No way. Nah, I'll break your fucking hands, I'll take your gear off you, I'll bash you and all this. And he would. So a couple of years later, my friend from the Gold Coast chapter actually wanted to open a studio in town, and he wanted me to run it. You know, he really respected me. He respected my art. He wanted to make money. He knew I was making good money, and he would have been fair with me. And so when he offered me the position, I'm like, yeah, bro, yeah, definitely. I'm all about that. But what about this guy? And he said to me, don't worry about him. I will sort it. You won't have any problems. I'm like, great. So the next day, my boss came in. I was sitting behind the counter, and he walked up and he pulled out a pistol and put it on the counter in front of me, and he said, you're not going anywhere. And I turned and said to him, yeah, but my mate said that it's okay. And I said, fuck. And I said, he ain't here now, is he? You're not going anywhere. And I talked to my friend, and my friend's like, don't worry about it. I said, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. My friend actually didn't open his studio at that time anyway. A few years later, he opened another studio, and I went to work for him. Eventually, I ended up moving down to the Gold Coast with my boss. He opened another studio down the Gold Coast with his partners, who were also club members. That was good. That was insane, the amount of work we were doing there. It was really busy all the time. Of course, it was the Gold Coast, it's a glitter strip. This was in the mid-2000s, so it was just on. We were busy all the time. And of course, he was all about it, you know, but he was constantly the same, yelling at us and, you know, threatening us and intimidating us, and it never ended. Around that time, he got done for a pretty serious crime, him and a few of the other club members. He was president of the chapter at the time, so he went down for it. He, I think, did about 3 years. Now, at that time, his business partners stepped in and took over. And they were great guys. I got really well with them, and I still do. And they treated us all very fairly, because they were like, we don't know anything about this business. He'd never really shared anything with us. We were just silent partners. So I helped them to understand how the business worked. And, you know, they were great. They were respectful to everyone. They treated everyone really well. But in doing so, they started looking into the books for the business and found some things didn't add up. a lot of things didn't add up, and it was all on my boss. So he was removed from the business, and he was removed from the club. At that point, they said, look, if anyone wants to leave at any time, they can. There's never going to be any repercussions. You can go and just, yeah, we're all good. Okay, I need to get out. I need to get out then. One of my friends who had worked for this guy had also done the same thing. She started working there after they took over her studio. She'd opened her studio in their hood, in their area. She didn't know anything about that. She was fairly new to tattooing, and she was an artist. She had no knowledge of the MC world or their studios. And so they went in there and said, you've opened in our area. And she's like, what does that mean? You know, he's like, well, there's another rival club here that owns studio, and if they don't take over, we will. But we'll stop them from taking over your studio. And she said, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, you're going to sell us half your studio and we're going to go into partnership with you. Yeah, and she said, but what if I don't? They said to her, you don't have a choice. They bought half of her studio, and within 3 months, they took it over completely. They didn't pay her any other money, and they moved her to their studio in Brisbane, where she worked for several years in total fear. She went from being a vibrant, bubbly, beautiful artist to someone who was just beat down completely. So yeah, I saw my opportunity to leave. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, great. Now, I was working in the Gold Coast, as I said. Now, one of my friends actually worked as a receptionist for another studio in town. It was legendary. The guy who owned it was an absolutely legendary tattooist, Paul Braniff. Amazing tattooist, amazing human being, and just an all-around great guy. He opened the first ever tattoo studio in the Gold Coast. Now, when my boss actually first opened his studio down there, he went and had a sit down with Paul, because Paul ran the Gold Coast. He had a lot of backing, not that he ever needed it. Now, my boss went there with the sit down with his little pistol in his pocket, trying to intimidate Paul, and he sat back and tried to show this pistol. And Paul said, yeah, that's pretty, but mine's bigger. Lean back. This guy just completely dropped his nuts. Paul wasn't someone to mess with. I was told that story by Paul and by my boss, and I laughed both times. Internally, when my boss told me, and then when Paul told me, I burst out laughing. It was the greatest thing ever. I'd spent 6 or 7 years with the MC-owned tattoo studios, and I'd gone through hell, and I'd seen others go through absolute hell. It wasn't a good time. The good thing was, these guys weren't around all the time. They wouldn't sit in the studio all day. They wouldn't come in all day. They'd come in once a week, collect the money and yell at us. They'd do everything else over the phone. All those years spent with the MC, I saw a lot of intimidation with other people. I saw the members who owned other studios going and intimidating other artists at other studios and going doing the standover. In fact, one of the members actually got done for that. He went and stood over a studio that had an undercover police officer in it. Yeah, they went in and bashed everyone. And then a day later, he got a knock on the door and he opened it to the guy he bashed in a fucking police uniform. Thankfully, everything changed around 2013. There was a massive incident caused by the club that I was a hang around with. So that incident brought in new laws into Queensland. Brought in anti-biker laws, and they brought in a Tattoo Parlours Act, which was designed to remove MCs from tattooing. Because it was well known, so many studios in Australia were owned by MC members, and it had been such a huge part of it for so long. And the government had had enough, and it was hard. We had to apply for these licenses, and if you're, connected in any way, or if you're, of unfit character to be dealing with the public, you wouldn't get a license. I never got a license. I was a hang-around associate, and I was also a full-patch member with the gang. So, I would not get a license. I was also, had my house raided and blah, 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 so I can never tattoo in that state again. From all of that, the tattoo industry has changed now. I've seen it. These guys can't even own studios anymore. There's so much less of the intimidation and the fear, and you should never be afraid when you're doing your job, any job. After that, you know, I moved around. I worked in many different studios. I worked for my friend from the Gold Coast chapter, you know, a couple of years after that. That was great. Worked for him for a few years. He was all about tattooing and just promoting it. And, you know, he treated his artists so well. We got so well looked after, you know. In fact, I miss working at that studio. I miss working for him. Yeah, we all do. It was fantastic. He sold his studio to a couple of his club brothers who didn't know anything about tattooing. You know, there was a lot of that same intimidation and fear coming back into it, you know, even though he'd told them, don't treat them like that, don't be like that. They still did. I'd quit the gang, so, you know, I'd moved away and started traveling overseas and working in different studios. And I swore after that time, I will never, ever, ever work for another MC-owned studio. I just won't do it. I will never actually work for anyone who uses fear or intimidation to control. No way. No way. And no one should ever have to. There you go. That's a little bit of an insight into, yeah, the dark times of those years working for MC-owned tattoo studios. It's pretty wild. Thank you so much for listening in. As always, much appreciated. Always great to have you here. Love your support. And hey, if you want to support me even further, you can buy me a coffee. Yeah, everyone knows you can buy me a coffee, you know, and yeah, links down below. But you can also buy merchandise, yeah, stickers, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. Head over to my Redbubble store, yeah. I did this last time with one of my videos, you know, and I thought it was pretty cool, so I thought I'd do it again. So yeah, check out my Redbubble for cool stuff like this. But as always, if you really want to support the channel, please feel free to give us a big like. Subscribe down below if you haven't already, and hit the little bell to get notified. And please feel free to share this video. Share it with all your friends, share it with your family, share it with your tattoo friends. I will see you on the channel next week on Thursday, Mr. Brad Raven on YouTube at 7 p.m. Hope you all have a fantastic day, people, and go get tattooed. Peace out, y'all.